What if a 2,500-year-old prophecy from the book of Daniel wasn't just some ancient, dusty text? What if it's actually a detailed prophetic clock? I mean, a precise timeline that's been counting down for centuries, mapping out major world events. Today, we're going to dive into an interpretation that says, yeah, that's exactly what it is. So, it all kicks off with this really cryptic message that the angel Gabriel gives to the prophet Daniel. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city. I mean, right away, those words set in motion this timeline that has been debated and picked apart for literally centuries. But the key to unlocking the whole thing, it might just be figuring out what a week actually means here. And this brings up some huge questions, right? Are we talking about literal 7-day weeks? Or is it something else entirely? Is this a prophecy that's already come and gone? Just a piece of history written in code? Or is it a countdown to events that are still in our future? A kind of prophetic roadmap that's still unfolding right now? Let's dig into the framework that tries to answer all of that. What's wild is how specific this prophecy gets. It's not about the whole world. It's laser-focused on Daniel's people, the Jews, and their holy city, Jerusalem. And it's not just a schedule of events. This reading of the text sees it as a blueprint for a massive redemptive plan. But, what's the end game? What's the ultimate goal of this whole thing? Well, the prophecy lays out 6 specific goals that have to be accomplished within this time frame. And look at this list. We are not talking about small tweaks here. We're talking about finishing transgression, making an end of sins, bringing in everlasting righteousness. These are monumental, world-altering goals that are the very heart of this prophetic clock. Okay, but hold on. Before we can even start to make sense of this timeline, we've got to crack a code. The entire prophecy, everything, hinges on the meaning of one single word, weeks. If we get this wrong, the whole prophetic clock is just useless. So what in the world is a prophetic week? The key, it turns out, is in the original Hebrew. The word they use for week, shabu, it just means a 7. That's it. It could be 7 days, sure, but it could also mean 7 years. It all comes down to the context. So how do we figure out which one it is? Well, this particular framework suggests there are 3 major clues that point to each week being 7 years. First off, the context. Daniel was praying about a 70-year prophecy, so years were already on his mind. Second, there's a precedent for this. The idea of a week of years was already a thing in Jewish law. And third, you get confirmation from other prophecies. The book of Revelation talks all the time about periods of 3.5 years, which is exactly half of a 7-year week. So you do the math, right? 70 weeks times 7 years each, boom, 490 years. If you follow this line of thinking, Daniel was given a precise 490-year timeline for the future of his people. This isn't some vague, mystical prediction. It's a specific, measurable countdown. But it gets even more detailed. The prophecy doesn't just give us this big 490-year number and leave it at that. Nope. It breaks it all down into specific chunks of time. And the first chunk is a 69-week period. That's 483 years. That is said to be anchored to actual, verifiable historical events. So let's see how this interpretation maps this ancient prophecy onto the pages of history. So this view says the prophetic clock started ticking way back in 445 BC, with the official order to rebuild Jerusalem. The prophecy even said the city would be rebuilt in troublesome times, which perfectly matches the story we read in the book of Nehemiah. But here's where it gets really incredible. The prophecy says that after those 483 years, the Messiah the Prince would be cut off, a term that suggests a violent death, and not for himself, but for others. And it doesn't stop there. The prophecy keeps going with another prediction. After the Messiah is cut off, it says the city and the temple, the sanctuary, will be destroyed by the people of the Prince who is to come. And many, many people read that as a direct bullseye reference to the Roman army destroying Jerusalem and its temple in the year AD 70. Okay, so this is where things take a really fascinating turn. The interpretation introduces this idea of a pause, like someone hit the pause button on the prophetic timeline. The events of the first 69 weeks seem to wrap up with what happened in the first century. But that 70th week, it doesn't start right away. Instead, the clock just stops, leaving this gap of unknown time between week 69 and week 70. This chart here does a great job of showing what we're talking about. This period we're in right now, this is seen as that gap, often called the church age. The thinking goes like this. Since Daniel's prophecy is specifically about Israel, this current age, which is all about the international church, isn't counted as part of that 490-year countdown. All right, so let's just recap for a second. The first 483 years are seen as done, historically fulfilled. The prophetic clock is now paused, with just 1 week, one final 7-year period left on the board. And this sets the stage for what is supposed to be the most intense and dramatic part of the entire prophecy, the 70th week. So what is supposed to happen in this final 7-year stretch? This is Daniel's 70th week, and it's described as a time of just unprecedented global events, not just here in Daniel, but in other prophetic books too, especially the book of Revelation. The main player in this final act is a future world leader called the Prince Who Is to Come, a figure most people identify as the Antichrist. He's predicted to rise up out of the territory of the old Roman Empire, and he's the one who will kick off the final 7 years by making some kind of covenant or peace treaty with Israel. But it's a trick. He's going to break that treaty right at the halfway point, and that's when everything descends into chaos. And this is where, for many, the whole framework just clicks into place. The events of Daniel's 70th week seem to line up perfectly with prophecies in the book of Revelation. The middle of the week in Daniel, that matches the 3.5-year periods of tribulation in Revelation. And the act of stopping the sacrifices is identified as the famous abomination of desolation, this crucial moment where this world leader demands that everyone worship him. Now, wait a minute. This brings up a huge, and I mean huge, implication. For this future leader to stop sacrifices, well, sacrifices have to be happening in the first place, right? This means that, according to this interpretation, a third Jewish temple has to be rebuilt and operating in Jerusalem at some point in the future. So we're left with this incredible puzzle, aren't we? Is Daniel's 70th week a literal historical timeline with one last dramatic chapter that's still waiting to be written? Or is it all a symbolic prophecy with a much deeper, more spiritual meaning? It's a 2,500-year-old mystery that is still absolutely captivating. And it leaves you with one last pretty big question. If this prophetic clock really is still ticking, what time is it now?